Hi, my name's Fursa. I'm a virtual production supervisor and the founder of VP Toolkit. Before we started working on larger productions, it all began with a projector and a bootcamped iMac that we used to do our first virtual production tests. I thought that this proved that virtual production could actually be done at any level. In this video series, I'm going to try and show you the techniques that I use on larger productions, but at an indie level so that you can use virtual production in your projects. In this video, I'm going to show you how to set up a virtual production studio with a projector and a laptop. This is for indie filmmakers, streamers, and anybody that wants to learn the fundamentals of virtual production. So here's a list of what I'm using in this video. I'm just going to pop it on the screen here. So I'll be using the VP Toolkit plugin, but I'm also going to show you how to do it with just Unreal Engine. Let's get started. Now that we've got our projector laptop set up looking good, let's set up our Vive CamTrack system and get some parallax. So the first thing that we'll want to do is attach power. Next, we're going to connect the LAN and PC jack with an Ethernet cable to our laptop's Ethernet jack. If you're going to be using a more complicated network, please check out some of our other videos or our online courses. We'll also be setting up two Vive rovers. Those will use an Ethernet cable to plug into the back, and then the other side will go into rover 1. This will be our camera tracker. Here's how I like to mount the Vive tracker onto my camera. So I like to use basically an assortment of small rig and other attachments that I've picked up in 4 15mm rods. So I have this piece which can be connected from the side if I need to run a rod horizontally, and then it can also screw on like this, and then I can run a rod vertical, which is what I'm doing in most cases. And then I have this little piece which I believe is actually a tilta attachment, and then a small rod, and then this will just go into here. But first we would mount this piece to the side of a handle or to the side of a camera, and this makes it so I can mount it in different ways. And then I also always bring a larger rod just in case I have to put the tracker well above the camera to get it out of the way of other things going on. I also have another rod that has this attachment that I use for the lens encoder. So anytime I need to mount the lens encoder, this can just go somewhere on camera, and I try to just get it as close to the lens as possible. You want to make sure that this mounting is very rigid and doesn't move during production. And then we're going to plug in our second rover. That's going to be our calibration tracker. And we'll just plug that into the rover 2 Ethernet port. We also are going to be using two Vive base stations. I don't mind using only 2 of these. In most situations, I'm using either 2 or 3. It's not often that I actually use 4. If one of the base stations can't see the tracker for some reason, or it's blocked by something, it will end up causing your footage to jump because it will not know exactly where that tracker is. Once it sees the base station, it's going to snap. To avoid that, you only want to have the base stations that you're using on, and you want to make sure that those base stations can see the tracker. And if you have to turn off a base station, just make sure you do a recenter calibration, and you should be good to go with only a few base stations. You also want to make sure that these are mounted properly on a sturdy stand or a rigid stand. This is called a lighthouse for a reason. It actually has a light inside of it that rotates, so it will cause itself to move if you don't use a rigid stand that can support it. You can also mount these, and as long as that surface is good, you'll be set. Now we want to set some settings in the Vive Mars CamTrack unit. So first I'm going to power it up. It's going to go through its startup screens, and we just have to wait. So once your CamTrack has started up, you can see that I have two rovers. Rover 1 we'll be using for camera, and then Rover 2 we're going to be using for a calibration tracker. And then I have two base stations, which if any of these were flashing, it would indicate that they don't see each other, so make sure that your trackers can see your base stations. So the first thing we're going to do is go to our network settings. And since this is plugged into a laptop, I'm kind of doing it in a very manual way, so I'll walk you through that now. If you know how to set up a network, or you're adding this to an already existing network, you may want to set this up differently. So first you want to set it to not obtain the IP address automatically, which is going to be a static or manual IP address. And then I'm going to use 10.5.10.201. So this doesn't really matter as long as there's no other networks plugged into your computer that are using the same subnet. And a subnet is the first three sets of numbers. For the subnet mask, I have 255.255.255.0. And then the default gateway, I would usually put nothing here, but it requires you to enter a default gateway. So I use 10.5.10.254. And that is just the last IP address that's available in IP addresses. So after hitting apply, your CamTrack unit might have to restart to apply the network settings that you changed. Now let's get into setting up the laptop and move into Unreal Engine. So again, we've plugged the Vive Mars directly into our laptop or PC that we're using. So I'm going to go to search and search for settings. And then in the settings, I'm going to go to network and internet. And I'm going to go to Ethernet. So I've already set this up, but I'm going to go over how I set it up. So we're going to go to the IP address. This may say DHCP. This is also Windows 11. If you're using another version of Windows, you'll have to go back, look up instructions on how to set the IP address. It should be fairly similar, but I'm just going to cover Windows 11 in this video. So I have my IP address set to the same subnet as the Vive Mars, and then 200 as the address of the port, and then the same subnet mask. If this doesn't say subnet mask, you might have to put 24 in here. I have no gateway, and then preferred DNS, I put the same as the default gateway, and this seems to work. Again, these are just the ways that I found to get this system to work plugged directly into a laptop. So if you have a more advanced network, go ahead and do whatever you have to do. Also, if you want to learn a little bit more about networking and how these systems connect into larger systems, you can check out our online course where we show how to set up render nodes, stage controllers, and multiple machines across a bigger network. And then you want to make sure that your DNS settings are also set to that. And that's what worked for me. You want to make sure to go to your command prompt, and I normally type in ipconfig and look at what the Ethernet adapter is doing and make sure that it has the correct IP address and the correct subnet mask. And then we can also ping the Vive Mars. So if we type ping space 10.5.10.201 and hit enter, we want to make sure that we get a reply from that machine. This kind of just confirms that you're connected to it. So now we want to set it up with our Unreal Engine project and the VP Toolkit plugin. So let's open up our switchboard, and we're going to deselect auto join again. We want to do this setup first outside of a multi-user session. Go into our switchboard settings. So this is another kind of band-aid that I'm using because I just haven't found a better way to do this at the moment. So if you want to just follow along, this method should work, but there's definitely easier ways to do this. So since Unreal Engine automatically sets a unicast endpoint into our projects, I just went in and went to the node and just set it to 0.0.0.0.0 as the port. And then I did the same thing in the editor. And what this is doing is it's just creating a open unicast endpoint. That means like the project and display that are running are kind of like, hi, I'm here, come come connect with me. Or more complicated setups, you may need to use this with an IP address to make sure that either your multi-user connects or your tracking gets to your render nodes. And make sure that the multi-user server is also that. If you already have a multi-user server running, you're going to want to restart that so that it reflects the changes that you did to the unicast endpoint. So I'm going to run the editor. So first we want to make sure we go up to our project settings and scroll down on the left side to UDP messaging and just make sure that your unicast endpoint did in fact get turned to all these zeros, because then it will work for this setup. So I'm going to go to Live Link, which if you go to Windows is in Virtual Production under Live Link. We want to add a source, and we're going to add a message bus source. You should see the Vive Live Link subject here, the source, and if we select that, we should now see our two rovers. If these are orange, that means, or yellow, that means that your connection is not connected. So green generally means that you are all good. So after we set that up, we want to save a Live Link preset. This is going to save a little preset for what we just set up. And I'm going to go to my VP Toolkit plugin studio content and go to user, and then I'm going to create a Live Link preset folder. And then in there I'm going to save this as Vive Mars Live Link preset. After we've saved that preset, we want to go to our project settings, scroll down to Live Link, and then select the Vive Mars Live Link preset. And that's going to make sure that every time you run your project or Unreal Engine starts up from this project, that it's going to automatically set that Live Link preset as the active Live Link preset. So that's what you're going to need when end display, your other instance that runs the background, runs. It needs to be able to know to connect to those Live Link sources. And now we want to connect it to our Frustum camera. So I'm going to select my Frustum camera so that I can see what it's doing, and then I'm going to pin it here. I'll also show you how to do this manually. And then if I go to the tracking tab, select enable, and then select the rover that you want to use. As I said before, we're going to use rover 1 for the camera. So now your tracking should be running the Frustum camera. You might want to just shake the camera to make sure that the tracking is live. If you're using the VP Toolkit plugin, you can set your camera model to appear like a standard camera. If you go to Frustum and then scroll down to the camera and then select the camera mesh and just search for RE, Red, or Sony. Okay, so I duplicated my Frustum camera to show you how to do this manually. We're going to go to add a Live Link controller. You could do this in the details panel of your cinema camera actor. Select Live Link controller, and then we're going to select rover 1. And that's how you'll want to set up your camera if you're doing it manually. I wouldn't recommend doing this with your Frustum camera if you're using the VP Toolkit plugin. You can use it for other objects that you want live in the scene, like active lights, tracked lights, things like that. But using this method, if you have the plugin, makes it so that you can't use all of the other features like the depth of field solver and all of the calibration that we're going to be doing in a minute. Once you save your project, your tracking should be live. In the next step, we're going to do a calibration to make sure that everything is set up correctly. The first thing you'll want to do is to recenter the Vive Mars. That means we're going to calibrate the 0 point of the tracking system. So the 0 point or root that I had talked about before, that we had originally measured our screen distance off of when we manually set its placement, we want to take that point and put the Vive on top of it, facing towards the center of your screen to create a forward x-axis. And then we're going to go into the Vive Mars and we're going to go to recenter. and then select your second rover, which is the one that you should be using for the recenter calibration. So here I'm going to select the bottom of the rover, so that's going to make that our ground plane. And then I'm going to select the center of the tracker, because that's going to be a more exact point for our 0 point. Now let's set up the ground plane, which is going to be ground setup. That's going to level our virtual tracking floor to our physical floor. I'm going to hit OK here. And then we're going to select rover 2. We're going to leave the rover at the 0 point facing the center of our screen. And then you're going to want to put the rover in the forward x-axis, which is going to create another ground plane point for the tracking system. And then we're going to do the same thing, but backwards. And then we're going to put the rover to the left of our 0 point, and then to the right of the 0 point. So next we're going to set the position of our projector screen. The way we're going to do that is go to our VP Toolkit stage widget, go to stage config, scroll down to mesh screen location, and then we're going to select the mesh, which is our screen here. You could manually enter in positions. This is where it currently is, and we're going to enable the set with tracker and then select rover 2. You should see your tracker live in the environment. So you'll want to set the tracker on the center of your screen as even with the screen as possible, with the cord going down, and just confirm that this little widget in Unreal Engine has the correct axis. So the red, which is X, should be facing in the forward direction of the screen, and the blue, which is Z, should be facing up, and the green, which is Y, should be facing to the right. And then when you place this on the screen, it should match the screen's orientation. So I'm going to do that calibration now, and let's go. So that should line up correctly with where your screen is in the actual world in relation to your tracking calibration. So you want to make sure that all of your base stations can properly see your screen while you're doing that to get the most accurate placement of that mesh. So next we're going to calibrate the tracker offset to where the camera actually makes its image. This is going to properly align our real camera with our virtual camera. You'll want to place the Vive Mars on the center of your lens as evenly with the front of your lens as possible, and the center of the Vive Mars, which is the light underneath the power button, in the center of your lens. So to do that calibration, we're going to go to the Fursa widget, our tracking menu, make sure that our tracking is enabled, and we're going to enable use tracker. And then I'm going to select rover 2, and you should see a live actor in the world. I actually want to go in and make sure I disable the mesh location set, because we just don't want those to clash or get confused with two widgets. So we'll want to measure the distance from the center of the lens to the back of this Vive Mars tracker. That is where the 0 point of the tracker is. We're estimating the nodal offset of the lens, which is basically where the light intersects and creates the image in the lens. This would be its 0 point. If you need a more accurate camera offset, I would recommend going through the Vive Mars calibration, and that will output a offset. But if that changes, you have to go through the entire offset calibration again. This is a quick way to be able to do a lens offset so that when you're changing cameras or adjusting your tracking on set, you're able to quickly recalibrate this. Once you've entered in the pupil distance, just hit select once you have the tracker on the camera. Now, to do this by myself, I use a small little controller that controls the mouse, and if I can't see the screen, I just leave it on the set button and then place the tracker on the screen or on the front of the camera lens, and then just hit the mouse button. Let's get our background fired up and let's test our tracking. So we'll want to go back into Switchboard, select Auto Join. You might want to go to another multi-user session. Make sure that you have a multi-user session running, and then we will run all of the connected devices, which is our editor and the virtual background behind us. Now you just want to confirm that your tracking is live in editor. You can select your custom camera and move around your camera, and you also want to confirm that your tracking is live on the wall. Now if you've done the calibration correctly, you should have a fairly accurate virtual background behind you. I'm Ian Fursa with VP Toolkit, and if you like this content, please subscribe to our channel. We also offer virtual production services, and make sure to check out our plugin. It's a real lifesaver on set. Now go film something. Film something cool, tag us. And I'll see you in the next one.